The sun beat down over Fort Valor's security checkpoint as soldiers in pressed uniforms moved with mechanical precision. Guards scanned IDs, saluted higher-ups, and waved cars through like clockwork. Among the routine movements, no one paid much attention to the woman sitting quietly on a wooden bench outside the main gate. She looked like any other, civilian early to mid-40s, plain denim jeans, worn-out sneakers, and a faded hoodie pulled over her head. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, a weathered canvas bag resting by her feet. The kind of person you'd walk past without a second glance. Maria Keller had been sitting there for nearly 4 hours. The young private stationed near the gate, bored from monotony, finally walked over. "Ma'am, you okay?" She nodded politely, not looking up. "Yes, thank you." He hesitated. "I don't mean to bother you, but do you have someone you're waiting for? Or a reason to be near the base?" "I'm here to see someone," she said simply. That only made the private more uncomfortable. "Well, unless you have military business or an escort pass, I'm afraid you can't be this close to the base for long. It's protocol." Maria looked up at him finally. Her eyes were calm, steady eyes that had seen things he hadn't. "I understand," she said. "I just need a little more time." Before he could respond, another voice broke in. "Private, what's going on here?" It was Lieutenant Patterson, a stocky, stern-looking officer who clearly didn't have patience for odd civilians. Private quickly straightened up. "Sir, this woman's been sitting here for several hours. She says she's waiting for someone, but she won't say who." Patterson narrowed his eyes at Maria. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see identification." Maria didn't move. "I don't have it on me." "Then I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area immediately." Maria reached for her bag slowly, carefully. As she did, the sleeve of her hoodie lifted slightly, exposing part of her forearm. That's when Patterson froze. He stepped closer, his brows furrowed. "Hold on." Maria paused, watching him closely. Patterson pointed to her arm. "What's that?" Maria said nothing. She slowly pushed her sleeve higher, revealing the full image. Ink faded by time, but still sharp. A coiled serpent wrapped around a dagger, set against twin-crossed wings. It was a tattoo few had seen, and even fewer would ever recognize. Patterson took a step back, visibly rattled. That's a Viper insignia." Another voice cut in from behind them. "Step aside." Colonel Daniel Rourke approached. Briskly, his eyes fixed on the tattoo. He was older, silver streaks in his hair, but the authority he carried was unmistakable. As he neared, his pace slowed, his expression shifting from suspicion to shock. He looked at Maria, really looked. "Is that real?" he asked softly, almost disbelieving. Maria held his gaze. "It is." Rourke stood silent for a beat, stunned. The private and lieutenant looked at each other, confused. Patterson opened his mouth to speak, but Rourke cut him off. "She's coming with me. Immediately." "Sir, is everything all right?" Patterson asked. "Do what I said, Lieutenant." Rourke snapped. Then he turned to Maria. "Come on, let's talk." Without another word, Maria stood and followed Rourke past the checkpoint. The young private watched her go, a flicker of awe and confusion in his eyes. He had no idea what just happened, only that the base's entire mood had changed in a heartbeat. Inside, as they walked toward Rourke's office in silence, Maria finally spoke. "You remember me, Colonel?" Rourke glanced at her sideways. "I remember that tattoo. I never thought I'd see it again. Not in real life." "Well," she said quietly, "I never thought I'd come back." As they entered the secured corridor, Maria's fingers gently touched the edge of her sleeve, pulling it down again to conceal the mark. It had been over 30 years since anyone saw it, since anyone even knew she existed. But now, the quiet woman who once disappeared from history was walking back into it, And this time, she wasn't leaving until the truth came out. Colonel Daniel Rourke stood stiffly behind his desk, staring at Maria Keller as if he were seeing a ghost. She sat across from him, calm but unreadable. Time had etched fine lines around her eyes, but her presence was the same quiet, watchful, unnerving. "You were Echo," he said again, more to himself than to her. Maria nodded once. "Still am." Rourke exhaled slowly and gestured to the door. "Everyone out, now." His assistants and aides left immediately, leaving only the two of them in the room. The moment the door clicked shut, Maria unzipped her weathered canvas bag and pulled out a thick envelope marked "Classified, hand deliver only." She placed it on the desk. Rourke didn't touch it. "You were declared dead," he said. "Desert Storm, the last Viper mission." "That was the plan," Maria replied. "You orchestrated your own disappearance?" "I had to. We were being hunted." Rourke blinked. "We?" "The whole unit." He sank into his chair, his hand gripping the edge of the desk. "I thought we lost you in Najaf." "Everyone did." "I made sure of it." She slid the envelope closer to him. "There's something you need to see." He opened it cautiously. Inside were old photographs, covert surveillance shots, dog tags, notes scribbled in code. But the thing that made his heart drop was a list of names, people he recognized. People from the Shadow Viper unit. Beside 5 names were dates and causes of death. Overdose, car crash, suicide, gas leak, heart failure. Too many. Too close together. "You're telling me these weren't accidents?" "They were hits," Maria said bluntly. "Someone's cleaning house." Rourke flipped the page and found her name. Maria Keller. Here. "No body recovered." He looked up. "Why come back now?" "Because I received this," she said, handing him a smaller envelope. Inside was a photo, grainy and faded, of her tattoo, with a single typed sentence: "You're next." "Stay silent." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "Someone knows you're alive," Maria nodded. "And they want me gone. But before that happens, I need to make sure the truth doesn't die with me." Rourke sat in silence for a moment. Then he opened a locked drawer, pulled out an encrypted laptop, and began typing. "I'm going to request sealed access to the Shadow Viper file." "Don't bother," Maria said. "It's gone." He looked at her. "I checked already. Wiped. The unit doesn't exist anymore." Rourke leaned back in his chair. "So we start with what we do have. Your documents, my memory. And one other thing." He picked up a secure landline and dialed. A number from memory. When the line clicked, he spoke in a low voice. "This is Rourke. I need Mason. Immediately. Shadow Protocol." He hung up. Maria raised an eyebrow. "You trust Mason?" "I have to," Rourke said. "He saved my life in Kandahar. Besides, he's not in the army anymore. Cybersecurity for a federal agency. He might help us trace whoever's behind this." Maria gave a small nod. "Good. We'll need eyes and firewalls." Rourke stood and moved to the small fridge in the corner. He pulled out 2 bottles of water and handed one to her. "I never thought I'd see you again, Keller." "I never thought I'd come back." "Why?" "Fort Valor? I knew you'd be here," she said, sipping water. "And I knew you'd believe me." Rourke gave a dry chuckle. "You are always smarter than the rest of us." There was a knock at the door. A nervous young corporal peeked in. "Sir, you're being requested at command briefing, urgent." "I'm busy," Rourke said coldly. "Sir, it's General Claiborne." Rourke froze. Maria stood up slowly. "Claiborne?" The corporal nodded. "He just arrived unannounced." Rourke turned back to Maria. "He was never supposed to know you were here." Maria calmly rolled her sleeve down over her tattoo again. Her expression hardened. "He knows," she said. "They all do. That tattoo was the flare." Rourke clenched. His jaw. We need to move now, before this becomes bigger than both of us. Maria picked up her bag and slung it over her shoulder. I'm not here to run anymore, she said. I'm here to expose them. Rourke walked to the door, then stopped. Echo, he said quietly. You're not alone this time. Maria gave him a rare smile. Good, she replied. Because this time, I finish what they tried to bury. Colonel Daniel Rourke walked briskly through the halls of Fort Valor, Maria keeping pace beside him. Their path curved around a high-security wing as they entered his private briefing room, a lead-lined bunker once used for nuclear threat simulations. No windows, no surveillance. Just silence and walls thick enough to bury the truth. Maria placed her bag on the table. You wanted to know what really happened, she said. Let me tell you about Najaf. Rourke nodded. He remembered the name. It was supposed to be a ghost stop. Never confirmed. Never public. Never spoken again. 33 years ago, the Shadow Viper unit deployed to Iraq for a mission so classified, even most Pentagon generals were kept in the dark. They weren't. There to engage enemies. They were there to clean up a disaster caused by a corrupt supply chain and rogue American contractors. At the heart of it, a massacre covered up as collateral damage. Maria had been there, then just 25 years old. Codenamed Echo, she was a rare hybrid sniper, medic, intelligence asset. Cold as steel in the field, but known for treating local villagers after operations ended. She leaned forward, hands folded. We uncovered files in a bunker outside Najaf. Signed orders. Video footage. Everything. We weren't supposed to find it. And once we did, we were never supposed to come back. She paused. Claiborne knew. He signed some of the logistics manifests. When we extracted, 2 birds were already waiting. They weren't evac. They were meant to wipe us out. Rourke's mouth was dry. He'd only heard whispers over the years. What happened? Maria's eyes darkened. 4 of us made it out. I got separated and disappeared into the chaos. I made it to a safe house across the border, then vanished. Why didn't you come back? I couldn't. Anyone who did was silenced, one by one. The others kept low. I stayed underground. Rourke pulled out his encrypted tablet and started scanning old intelligence records. I found a sealed cum log from that day, blackout at 0200 hours, and radio silence. Maria nodded. That's when the Vipers died. She handed him a flash drive. Everything I salvaged is on there, and one more thing, photos of the storage crate. It had Claiborne's unit crest on it. Proof, Rourke muttered. She stood, pacing slowly. The Viper unit was erased. Not decommissioned. Scrub it. Our names, our missions. Everything. I've been piecing it back together for over a decade. Rourke looked at her. You could have kept hiding. Why risk exposure now? Maria turned, her eyes burning. Because someone started killing the ones who were still in hiding. Last year, I got a letter handwritten. No return address. Just a photo of my tattoo with a date scribbled on it. The date my house burned down. Rourke's stomach turned. They're still watching you. They're still afraid of me, she corrected. Because I'm the last one who remembers it all? The sniper who saw everything. The medic who saved the data drive. He stood, jaw clenched. Then we go to Washington. We take this to the Oversight Committee. If the files are what you say, it'll shake the Pentagon to its knees. Maria walked back to her bag and pulled out an old Viper unit patch, the kind they used to wear beneath their armor. She slid it across the table. You'll need that, she said. You were one of us, even if they buried your name too. He stared at the patch, the old insignia nearly worn smooth. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out. Emergency lights blinked red. A base-wide alert sounded. Power cut? Rourke muttered. Maria pulled a pistol from her bag. Not a coincidence. The base intercom buzzed to life. Code Black lockdown. Unauthorized personnel breach. All officers report to status stations. Rourke grabbed his emergency sidearm from the wall locker. How fast can we disappear? Maria already had a plan. Back hallway, old boiler tunnel. Gets us outside the perimeter. They move swiftly. Not with panic, but with precision. Just like they used to Dot as they slipped through the emergency access corridor. Maria glanced over her shoulder. They think they can erase us, she whispered. But ghosts don't disappear. They haunt. Rourke smirked. And this time, they're the ones being hunted. The night was dark and quiet as Maria and Rourke moved through the old tunnel beneath Fort Valor. Pipes hissed steam along the walls, and dust floated in the beams of their flashlights. The tunnel hadn't been used in years, an old Cold War relic, but Maria remembered it from long ago. She had memorized every escape route back then. Just in case, they emerged a mile outside the perimeter, covered in dust, their breathing steady. A rented SUV sat hidden behind a line of bushes. Rourke punched in the code on the door panel. The lights blinked green. They got in silently. Rourke gripped the wheel but didn't start the engine. You sure you're ready for this? Maria glanced back toward the glowing base in the distance. We already started. They drove east. Maria said little. Rourke focused on the road, his mind racing. They didn't talk again until they pulled into a motel outside Roanoke. It was small, quiet, and off the grid. Inside, Maria spread out everything she had on the table. Dozens of files, some paper, some digital. There were surveillance photos of men in suits, death certificates, handwritten notes, redacted documents. Every one of them told a piece of the same story. Rourke picked up one of the papers. Michael Trent, discharged in '95, died in a cabin fire 2 years ago. Maria nodded. Viper unit. He picked up another. Jesse Nguyen, car crash in Arizona, 2019, Viper. A third, Rafael Estrada, suicide, but the handwriting on the note didn't match his. Also Viper. Rourke rubbed his face. This isn't just a coincidence. It's execution. Claiborne is tying off loose ends, Maria said. I'm the last one he didn't expect to resurface. But how did he know? Rourke asked. Maria opened a worn leather notebook. She flipped to a page and handed it to him. This was slipped under my door a week before my house burned. It was a photo of her standing near a grocery store, her back turned, unaware she was being watched. Scribbled in ink, finish what you started, or we will. Rourke stared at the words. So they were watching you for months. Maria nodded, which means they're watching us now. Suddenly, the motel room phone rang. Both of them froze. Rourke drew his sidearm. Maria answered calmly, Hello? Silence. Then a voice, male, calm, cold. We warned you once. Leave the past buried, Echo, or it'll bury you. Click. Maria hung up. Rourke locked the deadbolt. We can't stay here. Maria had already started packing. I have one more name. Someone who might help us. Who? She pulled a file from the bottom of her bag. Lieutenant Mason, Cyber Ops. Retired Viper. Lives in D.C. now. He stayed off the radar barely. Rourke scanned the address. You trust him? I trust he wants revenge as much as I do. Rourke loaded their gear into the SUV. Maria tucked the files back into her bag, double-checking the flash drives. Before leaving, she turned one. Last time to the room and quietly whispered, I'm not afraid of your shadows. Back on the road, the weight of what they were doing became clearer. They weren't just exposing a cover-up, they were up against a machine built on silence and death. But Maria had survived its first strike, and now she was striking back. By morning, They reached the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Y parked in an underground garage. Maria took the bag while Rourke scanned the area. A man in his 50s stepped out from a shadowy corner. Graying hair, heavy build, calm eyes. "Daniel," he said, nodding. "Mason," Rourke returned the nod. "We need your help." Mason looked at Maria, stunned for a moment. "Echo?" She gave him a small smile. "Still breathing." Mason exhaled sharply, disbelief in his face. "They told us you were gone." "They lied." He ushered them into a freight elevator. Once inside his office disguised behind a laundromat, they got to work. Mason plugged in one of Maria's drives and frowned. "This isn't just bad," he muttered. "This is explosive." Maria crossed her arms. "That's the point." He looked up at her. "You know, if we go through with this, they'll come for us." "All of us," Maria answered without hesitation. "They already did." Mason's underground office buzzed with old servers, backup batteries, and encrypted routers equipment no civilian eye was ever meant to see. The walls were lined with war memorabilia, but not the polished kind. Just silent reminders of missions. No one ever admitted happened. He leaned back in his chair, scanning the data Maria had smuggled out. Line after line of redacted orders, suppressed field reports, and mission footage ran across the screen. Rourke stood behind him, arms crossed. Maria sat nearby, still, watching. "I thought I'd seen dirty intel," Mason muttered. "But this is nuclear." "Every name on that list," Maria said, "is either dead or disappeared. Except us." Mason shook his head. "Claiborne's not just tying up loose ends. He's removing evidence. This goes all the way up." He pulled up a satellite tracking panel. "And it gets worse. You're both being watched." I picked up pinged. "Devices matching your heat signatures at 2 different rest stops. They have teams following you. Probably drones, too." Rourke's jaw tightened. "So we keep moving." Mason nodded. "But not by air, not by GPS. We go analog, old school. And we do it now." Within 30 minutes, they packed everything. Maria stored the key drives in a lead box and duct-taped it under the car's frame. Rourke changed plates on the SUV. Mason disabled the vehicle's GPS and tossed their cell phones into a sewer drain. They drove out of D.C. just after midnight, back roads and radio silence. Maria took the back seat, her eyes scanning the darkness. Beyond the windows, her mind wasn't resting. Its COULDN, single quotes T.images kept flashing. Jesse's smile before their last mission. Raphael's laugh when they trained in the desert. All gone. Systematically erased. She was done running. This mission wasn't about survival anymore. It was about truth at dawn. They stopped at an abandoned barn near the Blue Ridge Mountains. There, Mason set up a temporary satellite uplink to upload the evidence to multiple secure servers, with timed releases in case anything happened to them. "If we don't check in every 24 hours, he said, the files go to journalists, military, oversight, and 4 federal agencies. Rourke added, "That's our insurance policy." But Maria had one more move. She opened a smaller folder from her bag. One she hadn't shown either of them until now. Contained a photo of a young soldier, Claiborne's son, a former intelligence operative, dishonorably discharged, now working for Claiborne's private defense firm. "This is who burned my house," Maria said. "I traced the footage. He's running Claiborne's wet ops." Mason looked grim. "He's your handler, then? He'll be the one to stop us if we get too close." Maria stared at the photo. "Then we go through him?" Later that afternoon, they reached a gas station just outside Charleston. Rourke went in alone. Maria stayed in the car, feeling the itch between her shoulders, the instinct that something was off. A black sedan pulled into the far end of the lot. The driver stayed behind tinted windows. Maria reached for her weapon. Mason spotted it too. Too clean. No dust. No tags. Suddenly, two more vehicles turned into the street behind them. One from each direction. They were boxed in. Rourke burst from the gas station. Go now. Maria jumped into the driver's seat. Mason climbed in, laptop in hand. She slammed the gear into reverse, swung the SUV around, and gunned it down a side road. Tires screamed. Bullets shattered the rear glass. Rourke returned fire through the back window. Maria drove like the soldier she once was. Controlled chaos. She cut through side alleys, crossed a frozen ditch, and skidded into a rural access road. The SUV roared through pine woods until the gunfire faded. They finally stopped near an abandoned ranger station. Heartbeats pounded. Mason spoke first. That was a message. They don't want you to reach DC. Maria looked him dead in the eyes. And we don't walk in. Rourke raised a brow. What do you mean? We crash in, she said. No warnings, no requests. We get to Capitol Hill before they realize we're alive. We hand the files over in person. Mason nodded slowly. We go in like ghosts. Maria checked her pistol, eyes cold. No, she said. We go in like vipers. The abandoned ranger station had long been forgotten, but Maria, Rourke, and Mason turned it into a makeshift war room. Thick logs, rotting floorboards, and a smell of mildew surrounded them. But it was off the grid. No signals, no cameras, no prying ears. Mason rigged motion sensors and a jammer to block drones and satellite pings. Rourke cleaned weapons while Maria checked the backup drives for integrity. It felt like old times, but the stakes were higher now. They weren't soldiers under orders anymore. They were the last survivors of a truth no one wanted told. By midnight, they had a plan. We take the secondary rail line into DC, Mason explained. No ID needed, no checkpoints. We ditch the SUV and blend in with morning commuters. Then straight to the Capitol, Rourke added. We have a 2-hour window to hand off the evidence to the Oversight Committee. If we miss it, we don't, Maria interrupted. Her voice was steady. We're not missing anything. They left the ranger station before dawn, hiking 2 miles through the woods until they reached a forgotten service road. There, they buried the SUV under brush and debris. Maria left behind a single shell casing, polished and set atop the hood. A message, she said. We're still fighting. By the time they reached the small-town rail stop, they were dressed like ordinary civilians. Backpacks, ball caps, no eye contact. But the tension in the air was unmistakable. The train was late by 8 minutes. That's what gave them away. Maria's instincts screamed. She spotted 2 men standing too close, not speaking. Hands in pockets, watching reflections, not people. One of them tapped his earpiece. We're burned, she whispered. Mason slipped the main flash drive to Maria. Get it to the committee. No matter what, Rourke cursed under his breath. We split. You go west, I'll draw them east. No, Maria snapped. We stay together. Echo, Rourke said, softly but firmly. We follow the mission. Before she could argue, the men drew weapons. The train roared into the station behind them, drowning out gunfire as passengers screamed and ducked. Maria shoved Mason toward the far platform, firing as she moved. Rourke tackled one of the attackers, knocking his pistol to the ground. The second gunman tried to flank, but Maria clipped him in the leg. They disappeared into the train. Just as the doors slid shut, the train lurched forward. Maria pulled Rourke and Mason into the restroom, locked the door, and braced herself against the wall, breathing hard. That was too close, Mason said, wincing. They knew our route. They must have hacked the satellite drop, Rourke said. They're one step ahead. No, Maria corrected, checking her weapon. They're desperate. We're close, and they know it. They switched trains twice, changed clothes, and finally slipped into D.C. by mid-afternoon. The air was hot, sticky, and loud, but Maria felt colder than ever. The city had changed since she last saw it. Towering monuments, marble buildings, tourists everywhere. But beneath it, the system still smelled of power, secrets, and betrayal. They made their way to the federal building near the Capitol's West Wing. Maria's heart pounded with every step. A young staffer met them at the checkpoint. "Echo team?" he asked in a whisper. Rourke nodded. "Room 215. Oversight Committee. Closed-door session." Security guards opened the doors to a long corridor. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. Mason handed over a duplicate drive to the clerk. Maria kept the original in her bag. As they reached the committee room, Maria paused. She took a breath and looked at her reflection in the glass hair tied back, lines across her face, a scar above her temple. Time had taken much, but it had not taken her will. "Are you ready?" Rourke asked. Maria adjusted her sleeve, exposing the viper tattoo. "No more hiding," she said. "They took everything from me. This is the day I take it back." The doors opened. Inside, senators turned as Maria Keller, the woman who was never supposed to exist, stepped into the light. The Oversight Committee chamber was silent as Maria walked in, flanked by Rourke and Mason. The senators, aides, and legal observers seated around the mahogany U-shaped table didn't recognize her, not yet. But within minutes, they would know. Her name better than any headline that week. "State your name for the record," the chairman said. Maria stepped forward. "Maria Keller, formerly codenamed Echo, Shadow Viper Unit, U.S. Special Operations, 1990 to 1992. A rustle of surprise passed through the room. The name Shadow Viper had been buried so deeply, many thought it was a myth, or at best, an off-the-books experiment. "You're aware that unit has been declassified as non-existent since 1993? The chairman continued. Maria nodded. "That's exactly why I'm here." Rourke placed the hard drive on the table. "This contains evidence of war crimes committed under U.S. contractor supervision during the Gulf War, covered up by high-ranking officials, including General Claiborne. It also includes proof of a targeted effort to eliminate members of the Shadow Viper unit over the past decade." The room shifted uncomfortably. One of the committee lawyers leaned forward, skeptical. "You're alleging that a decorated general has orchestrated multiple assassinations and intelligence falsifications spanning 30 years? Maria reached into her backpack and retrieved a manila folder. She slid it across the table. "These are photographic comparisons of all known Viper members, their death reports, locations, and timestamps. You'll notice an uncomfortable pattern. Convenient deaths. No witnesses. Falsified autopsies." One of the senators flipped through the folder, his expression changing with each turn of the page. Another lawyer leaned into the mic. "Where were you for the past 30 years, Miss Keller?" "Hiding," she said plainly. "After surviving the Najaf operation, I went dark. I knew if I surfaced, I'd be next. And yet, here you are." She met his gaze with steel in her eyes. "Because I got tired of watching my friends die without justice." Senator Parker, a retired Navy man himself, cleared his throat. "Do you have anything more concrete?" Maria tapped her wrist. "On my body is the last piece of proof you'll need." She rolled up her sleeve and pointed to the faded tattoo, the Viper insignia. "Every member of our unit wore this. You can check archived mission photos. But more importantly," she reached into her bag one final time and pulled out a worn black notebook. "This is my field journal. Names, dates, maps, coordinates. I've kept it for 33 years. Because I knew one day someone would listen. Parker stood and walked over, taking the notebook carefully. You understand this will become evidence? Maria nodded. That's why I brought it. A moment later, the doors opened and 2 federal agents entered, whispering something to the committee chair. He stood slowly and looked at Maria. We've just received confirmation from Homeland Security. General Claiborne's private jet has landed at Dulles. We believe he may be aware of this session. Mason shifted. If he gets wind of what's being presented, he'll either flee or act fast to stop it. Maria didn't flinch. Then don't give him time. The chairman tapped his gavel. We are initiating emergency classification under Title 10, effective immediately. All evidence will be secured and reviewed by counterintelligence. Miss Keller, Mr. Rourke, Mr. Mason, you are now under federal protection. The aides scrambled to gather drives, files, and the journal. A dozen new agents swept into the room to escort the trio as they were led down the Capitol's side corridor. Maria looked out a narrow window. Down on the street, news vans were gathering. Somehow, word was leaking. She turned to Rourke. We did it. He gave a tired smile. We started it. Mason added, now comes the storm. But Maria felt strangely calm. The truth was finally in the light. It couldn't be buried again. Not this time. She adjusted her sleeve again, but let the tattoo remain visible. As they stepped into the black SUV waiting outside, she whispered, let him come. Let the world see what we really were. And for the first time in over 3 decades, Maria Keller wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a witness. And soon, a reckoning. General Claiborne's espresso machine sat idle in the private wing of the Pentagon's VIP lounge, a chilling contrast to the flurry of alerts on his secure line. Agents burst in, saluting as Claiborne looked up, knife-sharp eyes narrowing at the intrusion. They presented a sealed warrant. Charges of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of accessory to homicide. A man who once commanded. Covert killers now trembled in handcuffs. In Washington's federal courthouse. Maria Keller sat in the gallery under bulletproof glass. Rourke and Mason flanked her as witnesses. The courtroom buzzed with reporters, cameras, and the weight of history. Claiborne slumped, defeated, as his former prosecutor laid out the Shadow Viper cover-up. Massacres hidden beneath bureaucratic lies, bodies disposed of as accidental casualties, and each Viper death meticulously orchestrated. The judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts. A hush fell before applause erupted in the hallway. Maria sat still, face impassive, feeling only relief. After decades, the nightmare that drove her underground was over. Later that afternoon, at the Pentagon Archives, Rourke watched as archivists restored the Shadow Viper unit's file. Dusty volumes once stamped, destroyed, were unsealed. Photos of the Vipers in Iraq huddled around a wounded child, firing a last stand, saluting the fallen flickered on archival screens. Maria's name, erased in 1993, returned with honors. Echo, Specialist, U.S. Army Special Ops. Word spread like wildfire across military bases and veterans groups. Old Viper survivors, those who'd hidden in witness protection, came forward. At a small memorial service on the National Mall, dozens of former teammates gathered around Maria. Rourke delivered the eulogy. They tried to bury our names, but not our deeds. Today, we stand together, alive, remembered, and free. Maria knelt by a stone plinth carved with the Viper insignia. She laid fresh flowers for each fallen comrade, Trent, Nguyen, Estrada, and the others. She whispered their call signs. Phantom, Bravo, Ghost. Her voice broke on the last. Echo. A breeze rustled the petals, and she rose, face lifted toward the Washington Monument. Despite the accolades, medals, and press tours, Maria longed for silence. So she slipped away from the crowds, seeking solitude in a small town in Idaho. There, she bought a modest cabin by a lake. No reporters followed. She gave no interviews. Instead, she painted landscapes, tended a vegetable garden, and volunteered at the local clinic, using the medic skills she'd once practiced in the desert. In the evenings, she'd sit on her porch, with her sleeve rolled up, gazing at the tattoo that had cost her so much and yet saved her life. Occasionally, a neighbor would wave as they drove by. They knew her only as Maria Keller, the helpful nurse, the quiet artist. They didn't know of the storm beneath her calm. One autumn morning, a letter arrived in a plain envelope. Inside was a single photograph, the viper patch pinned to a folded flag at the Pentagon, alongside Rourke, Mason, and a new generation of soldiers saluting. The caption read, "Shadow Vipers, Never Forgotten." Maria folded the letter carefully and placed it in her journal. She sipped her coffee, watching geese glide across the lake. For the first time, her future felt unburdened by ghosts. The world knew the truth. The Vipers had been honored. Justice had landed, yet she kept one file locked away in her cabin, a black notebook filled with field notes, coordinates, and scribbled memories. She vowed to pass it to the next generation when the time was right, because truth, she understood, was a living thing. It needed witnesses, ink, and sometimes sacrifice. On a late November afternoon, she slipped into the local cafe. The barista, a young woman with curious eyes, asked her name. Maria smiled gently and said, "Maria Keller." Then she added, almost to herself, "Echo." The barista paused, pen hovering. "Echo, like the sound?" Maria looked out at the falling leaves and whispered, "Like a memory that refuses to die." And somewhere in the mountains, far from the world she'd saved, Maria Keller, the woman once told to leave the base, finally found her peace. A legend returned, not with gunfire and secrecy, but with quiet resolve and enduring truth.